Good morning, everyone. This is James Anderson, Director of Grants here at the Regional Arts Commission.
Good morning.
Okay. All right. So we might have a few people still joining us, but we are going to get started. Just so you know, this is being recorded. As long as I don't flub up the recording, I'm going to be posting this one or another workshop online. So do know that we are going to make this available to you in case you need to refer back to it later on when you're reading the grant applications. Okay. So I'll start off that if you have a hard time hearing Jess or I, please let us know. We do have the group chat going. So if you have any questions that come up, please feel free to use the group chat. We are going to have everybody on mute. But if we need to open it up for a discussion or ask for some clarifying questions, I'd be happy to unmute everybody. Sometimes it's easiest to get questions addressed. So I am going along with a slide deck. So I know a few of you might be calling in on the phone, but this slide deck and the recording will be made available to everyone. Okay, so the topics for today, I am going to briefly go over RAC's grant making so that you get the full picture of the Regional Arts Commission and all that we do. We'll be going over the roles and responsibilities that you have as a citizen review panelist. We will be taking a close look at the review criteria and how we rate applications. We'll discuss panel comments, what we're looking for in panel comments and how we use those comments. We'll also be talking about the meeting format and how we're going to actually go about and doing the review process. I will point out the grant review system and take a look at the application as a whole. And of course, there's time for question and answers. Okay, some of the things that you have available to you is the grant, the Citizen Review Panelist Handbook that is linked to on our website. We'll also be emailing you out that link as well so that you have it in several places. That is tailored specifically for you all. It is publicly available, so the grant, our applicants do have access to it. We will also share with you the grant information guide. This is primarily intended for the applicants, but we want you to have access to it as well so that you can see what our applicants are being trained on. I'll at different times refer to two different websites, racstl.org. That is RAC's website where you can find more information about our programs as well as the Citizen Review Panelist and Discipline Reader information. But we also have grants.racstl.org. That is where you will actually do the review of the applications. And so you all will have an account created for you at that site, and that's where you'll log in and read the application. Okay, so a little bit about RAC, just so that you're all familiar. RAC is at the forefront of efforts to transform St. Louis into a more vibrant, creative, and economically thriving community by elevating the vitality, values, and visibility of the arts. And we do that through our grant making primarily. And we provide financial support both to nonprofit organizations as well as individual artists. And our panelists and discipline readers have a role in both of those. Where we get our funding, it's a 4/15 sales tax on hotel and motel. So we share that with Explore St. Louis. And that's derived from a tax in St. Louis City and St. Louis County. And that's why our grant making is restricted to the city and county of St. Louis. We've been at it since 1985, and since that time, We've made more than 7,000 grants. I think we're up to about 7,250 these days, totaling well over $100 million. We make our grants in 4 discrete areas. We have 2 grant opportunities for organizations and 2 grant opportunities for individual artists. Again, both of them have either the disciplined readers or the citizen review panelists involved. For organizations, we make grants in the amounts of $15,000 to $300,000 in general operating support. These are 2-year grants. And then we also have program support. And this is where most of you are helping us out at. And in program support, we make grants between $1,500 and $15,000. And these are competitive 1-year grant opportunities. Next, we have individual artists. We have artist fellowships and artist support grants. Both of them have discipline readers. And so if you've enjoyed your time serving as a citizen review panelist and want to read some individual artist grants, we have discipline readers that help us out with those. But in our artist fellowships, these are our most competitive artist grants. We make 10 fellowships of $20,000 each annually. And so we award 10 grants there for a total of $200,000. And then for our artist support grants, these are available every 6 months. And these are grants between $500 and $3,000. And we typically award about 60 of those a year. And so we make, this year we've budgeted $200,000 for artist support grants. Okay. For some of you, you've reviewed in years past, and some things have changed. And so I mentioned this to you just so you have a brief understanding of some of the developments that RAC has made in its grant making. So when our new executive director, Felicia Shaw, started in 2015, we discontinued some of our grant opportunities, namely our opportunity grants, innovation grants, social impact grants, and we also discontinued 2-year program support grants. Just for reference, that was also the last year of what was formerly called operating support, and that will be important in a little bit. Once we discontinued those in 2016 and 17, we rolled out the new program support, which we're continuing to use. And that's where we introduced new distinct grant tiers. We introduced the review criteria we're going to speak to, and we had just new grant categories. This is also where we trialed our GOS pilot. So we brought about 16 new organizations into general operating support. And we also introduced a new grant information guide, much of which we're going to speak to throughout this training. In 2017-18, we introduced a funding formula for general operating support. And then we continue to make improvements and clarifications in program support. This is also where we introduced discipline readers, citizen discipline readers for our artist support grants. And then last year, 2018-19, we made some final tweaks to our funding formula for GOS, and we continue to make some clarifications around program support. And then for our artists, we introduced a grant information guide for them, and also clarified and added some review criteria and introduced discipline reader training for that group, which we've evolved into this training for you all. So that was a little bit about the recent past, and then some of the things that are new this year, just again so that you're aware of them. We are reintroducing 2-year grants for general operating support. Our applicants there are quite pleased with that. And so we won't be considering new GOS applicants until December 2020. With program support, we continue to improve some of our language to clarify our grant tiers so that our applicants better understood what we expected of them there. We also rebranded our arts-based community development grant category to community arts programs. it was a much clearer name of what we intended, and we actually saw an increase in this grant category because it was a little clearer about what programs should be applying there. And new this year, and this is a benefit to you all, we have introduced an honorarium for all of our panelists. And so for all of our citizen review panelists, we'll receive an honorarium of $300 in recognition of the time and commitment it takes to review all these applications at home and the time it takes to review them a full day meeting later next month or April. Okay. This is is a nice point to pause because I think everybody that's joined us has joined us. And so I'm going to unmute everybody. And I know this is not the easiest way, but would like everybody to introduce themselves. So let's see if I can unmute everybody at once. Okay, so could I get each person to just introduce their name, what their professional background is, and kind of why they're interested in serving as a panelist. And I am going to say your name so that we know who's supposed to talk. So Brian, could you introduce yourself?
Sure, happy to. So my name is Brian Gross. I currently work as a director of finance and operations for a school in the St. Louis area, Northside Community School. And my background has previously been working in local government and finance. One of the reasons why I was ecstatic to be able to volunteer with this particular group is because I am a big advocate of the arts. I've been in St. Louis for 11 years. Prior to that, I was originally in Chicago. And so to be able just to work with you all to support artists in the community sounded like something I was just interested in being a part of. So,
okay. Thank you, Brian. And then Kelly?
Yeah, Kelly Trivers. I am a fundraising consultant, and I'm a commissioner at RAC.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Ken?
Hi, I'm Ken Harrington. I'm retired from Washington University, where I ran the Scandalera Center for Entrepreneurship. And we had partnered with RAC back in the innovation era, and I'm very supportive of the arts and just wanted to help out where I could.
Okay. Thank you, Ken. And then Phil?
Phil Dunlap, Director of Education and Community Engagement at Jazz St. Louis, and I'm involved in the arts community through work and just as a musician myself. So I love supporting the arts community in any way I can.
Thank you. And then Andre?
Hi, Andre Stevens. I'm a Senior Director at Doherty Business Solutions. So I'm an IT consultant by day, but I just love the arts. I've always been interested and engaged in the arts. So.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, and then we have two phone numbers, so I don't know your name, but whoever is at 640.
I guess that's me. It's Marcia Mellett. And I've been involved in technology entrepreneurship and have been a long time supporter of the arts and organizing a group of friends to go to a lot of different performances. And I served on I was an early and long time board member of Theater Project Company when that was here. And also I do collect visual arts as well. So that's a range of involvement in the arts.
Wonderful, thank you. And then we have one more person on the phone who's at 704.
Yes, my name is Julia Lopez. I work at WashU in women's health. I'm a researcher. A lot of my time has been spent working in the community with marginalized, underserved populations. So a lot of my work is related to mental health and then complementary and alternative kind of forms of care. So which a lot of it revolves around art. I was on the board of ArtScope, so working with children who are also in need of after school programming. And then I've done a lot of grant writing, well, for my own stuff, because we have to make money at WashU to stay employed here. And then also been a person who oversees a lot of grant making processes with different community partners, depending on what it is that they're looking to do or interested in having done.
Excellent. Thank you. So thank you all for introducing yourselves. You all are now back on mute. So again, if you have questions, please feel free to use the chat box. And if we need to open it up for a discussion, I'd be happy to. Okay, so continuing on, I'm going to discuss our grant making programs in a little bit more detail. We have our general operating support. And general operating support provides unrestricted renewable funding to support the day-to-day operations of our arts organizations. They do have to be mission-specific arts organizations. And this grant category uses a funding formula. It is intentionally a regressive funding formula. And basically what that means is that as an organization gets larger, the percent of their budget that they're able to receive from RAC gets smaller. However, it is a increasing award amount. And as I mentioned earlier, these are 2-year grants. General operating support is broken up into 3 levels. We have panelists that serve on all 3 of these levels, but this is broken up namely by size. And so organizations between 150 and 500, 500 and 1.5 million, and 1.5 million or larger. For program support, as I mentioned earlier, this is a competitive 1-year grant-making program, and the purpose is to support one-time projects or ongoing programs that broaden and deepen participation and increase access to the arts. We do this through our grant tiers, and so there are $3,000, $5,000, $10,000, and $15,000 grant tiers. Many of you will be assigned based on a grant tier, and through this, applicants are able to receive between $1,500 and $15,000. And this is specifically for programs that will occur between July 1st, 2019, so the second half of the summer and fall this year, and then going through June 30th of next year, so June 30th, 2020. Program support is broken down into 3 categories: arts and culture programs, cultural festivals, parades, and special events, and community arts programs. We get the most applicants in arts and culture programs, and these are the more traditional arts for art's sake programs, which consists of performances, concerts, exhibitions, readings, arts education programs, and other such things. We then have cultural festivals, parades, and special events. And these are specifically those one-off things, like the one-day events, the 2-day weekend festival. And overall, the purpose of these are to enhance St. Louis's economic vitality and increase the region's visibility and desirability as a destination for out-of-town visitors. Lastly, we have our community arts programs. And these are programs that use the arts as a tool for social change and civic engagement. In short, these are projects with a specific mission, but utilize the arts as a tool to accomplish that. I'll speak briefly about our artist support grants. These provide direct funds for individual artist projects, needs, or creative opportunities, and therefore between $500 and $3,000. These open up every 6 months. We currently have our artist support grants open. So if you have any friends or colleagues that might be interested in pursuing an artist support grant, feel free to let them know. Next, we have our Artist Fellowship, and as I mentioned before, these are an award of $20,000 to 10 individual artists, and these are to recognize artistic excellence and honor the work of seasoned artists, advance the work of mid-career artists, and kind of nurture the work of developing artists. These again will open up later this summer. Before we start getting into the details of the review process, do want to let you aware of two of RAC's policies. We do have a freedom of expression policy. Basically, our artists and arts organizations have freedom of thought, inquiry, artistic expression through their programs. And so, in short, basically, our organizations have the freedom to use their art forms, and we can dislike something or not agree with something, but they do have the freedom to express themselves through those programs. Also, to let you know about RAC's cultural diversity policy. RAC advocates respect, inclusion, and appreciation of the diverse culture and backgrounds of all individuals. The Commission is committing to working through the arts to eliminate bias and prejudice based on race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, gender, age, sexual orientation, religion, or disability. The Commission encourages and supports and strengthens our arts organizations and programs to reflect these values. And we also accomplish this through partnering with other organizations to address issues of diversity. Okay, now we're going to jump into roles, responsibilities, and some of the key dates. You all here are here as citizens or one commissioner, but we invite dozens of citizens to participate in our citizen review panels. These are made up of 5 people, 2 of whom are commissioners, 3 of them are citizen panelists, and you all consist of members of the St. Louis arts and culture community. You might be members of an arts organization or an arts education, or you might be members of the general St. Louis community with a passion for the arts. You all play a central role in our grant making process. Jess and I are here on staff. We don't make the award determinations. It's based off of the ratings that you all provide. And so you guys are integral to the process of our grant making. And we do ask that you all commit to the time for an orientation. So thank you all for committing to this morning. Committing time to read all the applications. You'll start to receive them later this week or next week. So we ask that you commit the time to reading these applications in full and reviewing the work samples. And also asking you for the time to commit to a half to a full day meeting to rate these applications. So we'll go through the review process. And this has started with staff all the way back in December. So just so you're aware, all of our applications must submit a pre-application. At that stage, Jess and I check to make sure that they're all eligible and they're applying in the correct grant category and tier. We do this so that we don't have ineligible applicants. We know that our applicants commit a lot of time and energy into preparing these applications, and we all hate to see them waste their time if they're ultimately not eligible. This also ensures that you're receiving applications that are eligible. Then our applicants submit a full application. RAC staff check to make sure that there's no explicit issues or any red flags. And so Jess is going through that right now. Next, they'll be getting sent out to you. And so we do ask that you read and rate these applications at home before the citizen review panel. At the citizen review panel meeting, that's where we'll have the discussion about the applications in person. Afterwards, our job's not quite done. If by chance a mistake was made during the citizen review panel, our applicants do have the right to an appeal. We'll reconvene you all in a conference call or likely one of these Zoom meetings, and we'll discuss that appeal. After that, RAC staff will apply the funding formula and the ratings, and so that will ultimately determine what their awards are. That then goes to the grants committee, who recommends the funding level. And after it gets the grants committee approval, it goes to the full commission, who will do the final approvals. And then we'll do the awards announcements in May for program support and June for general operating support. Okay, and so I've mentioned on several occasions our review criteria and ratings. We have 3 review criteria: artistic merit and quality of programs, community benefit, and organizational capacity. These 3 review criteria, depending on your perspective, are either weighted equally or not weighted at all. So each of these 3 are equally important and all feed into what an applicant's final rating is. The review criteria are a little different on GOS and program support, but overall they fall into these 3 categories. Since most of you are program support panelists, I'm going to speak mostly to the program support review criteria. Okay. So for artistic merit and quality of programs, we always ask our panelists to take into consideration the organization that they're reviewing. We do consider artistic merit and quality of programs together because depending on the program that somebody is submitting, the emphasis may be on the art that's being produced. This is most important for producing or presenting organizations. So if we have a theater company, we would want to look at the quality of the shows that they're producing. If we have a arts education program that's working with middle school students, the theater production, we of course wouldn't be of the same caliber as a professional theater, but we will lean more heavily on the quality of the programming that is being offered. And so we'll want to see about the teaching artist. We'll want to hear about the quality of the curriculum. So when you're reviewing your program, your applicants, keep in mind what the focus is. And so you can lean more heavily on artistic merit or lean more heavily on the quality of the programs being produced. Either way, we're looking at strong artistic vision and leadership. So we're looking at the artists or the teaching artists hired. Are they engaging in compensating qualified individuals? Is the programming that they're offering distinct and unique? Is it enriching what is available in St. Louis? Is it preserving different cultural traditions that are in St. Louis? We know that we're not all experts in all of these disciplines, and so we lean heavily on third-party reviews, or in this case, does the audience, is it still relevant to the community, and is that demonstrated in the audience and participation numbers? Do they have quality work samples? And so this is where we want to look at those things outside of the narrative. So do the work samples demonstrate the quality? And then are they committed to continuously offering quality programs through evaluation, goal setting, and the like? Okay, for community benefit, all of our applicants have the ability to define the community that they serve. Is it a particular neighborhood? Is it a particular area of the city? Is it a particular group of individuals. So they'll have the opportunity to describe to you who they're serving, but then it's also necessary for them to then articulate to you as panelists that benefit. So have they demonstrated that the organization understands the community they serve? Do they use that knowledge of their community to inform their programming decisions? Are they working to make sure it's still relevant? Do they have those feedback tools, surveys, evaluation, and whatnot? Do they have proper diversity of individuals involved in the program? Do they have intentional outreach strategies? And so have they articulated, not that they just have a desire to increase the diversity of folks who participate or come to their programs, but have they shown specific strategies or partnerships that would help and actually accomplish that? Are they increasing access to the arts? Are they providing more opportunities in the communities they serve? Do they have neighborhood-based programming that's getting more folks involved? And ultimately, are they continuing to contribute to the vibrancy of St. Louis's neighborhoods and communities? Okay, for organizational capacity, again, we're focusing in on program support because that's the majority of you all. For our organizations, again, and this is where we will talk about the organization as a whole, not just the program that they're applying for. We do ask that you keep in mind the size of these organizations. We might be seeing very small micro budget organizations that might be only $30,000, $40,000, and that might be the organization in its entirety. We may also, in some of your panels, see multi-million-dollar organizations. So it is appropriate when considering organizational capacity to scale it to the organization being reviewed. And so take all of these review criteria, and we have to apply them to all of our applicants, but it is fair and appropriate to have slightly different expectations for a $30,000 organization compared to a $200,000 organization. That being said, do they have experienced staff, or in the case of some of our applicants, volunteers, to appropriately implement the program? So will they be able to pull it off? Do they have an engaged and diverse board of directors? Again, look at these organizations individually. Is this board a working board that's directly involved in the programming? But are they also contributing financially? Or has this organization transitioned to a full fundraising board? Either way, we're looking at how this board is engaging. Do they have a history of successful arts and culture programs and a clear plan to implement the project or program? So have they articulated their past success? If it's a new applicant or a new program, have they demonstrated success in other areas that will translate well to pulling off the program they're applying for? Do they have regular short and long-term planning for this to ensure that they are building their own organizational capacity? Then we can start looking at kind of the finances. Is the project budget realistic? Is it appropriate to the scope of the project? And does it reflect a diversity of funding sources? All of these projects require a match, and some of these projects may be more expensive than their grantor. So do they have the funding necessary to pull it off? This is also where you can have a critical eye and look if it's realistic. If you have a background in nonprofit management, in running an arts organization, it's wholly appropriate to bring that expertise and say, they're telling me X, Y, and Z, but based on their budget, you might have a question if they could even pull it off for that amount. Or on the flip side, if they have what might appear to be an inflated budget, And so you're not seeing the amount of programming being offered matching with the budget. We also know that to be successful, there has to be some marketing efforts for the programs. So do they have appropriate marketing? And then this is usually where Jess or I might have a few comments, but was there effective management of past RAC grants? Again, Jess or I will usually make notes about this component in advance. Okay, so the next question is, we have these review criteria, but how do we actually provide that rating? RAC utilizes a 4-point rating system, basically 4, 3, 2, or 1. You can think of it similar to GPA. And within these 4 points, there are some steps in between. So for 4s, we have 4s and 4 minuses. We do consider 4s to be rare. We don't expect or see a lot of 4s. We see some 4 minuses, and we really reserve this rating for model organizations. So they've really hit those review criteria to a T. They've demonstrated something in their application that speaks to each of them, and there's really no questions about their application. When we get to the 3s, there's areas for improvement. A 3+ and a 3 are still good ratings. A 3+ is a strong rating. When we get down to the 3 minuses and then lower, we're starting to have a lot of questions. Maybe they missed the mark on articulating who their community they're serving. Maybe there's some generalities made and the panel wanted more information about something. When we get down to the 2s, our applicants that is a fundable rating. However, there's significant room for growth and improvement. And then when we get down to the 2s, 2 minuses, and 1s, basically when an applicant receives a rating there, that's the citizen review paneling that this program is not fundable. And then I show you this slide, not to say this is what you have to rate, but just this is where the ratings fell last year, just to provide some context. In program support, we received 168 applicants, but we're only able to award 89. So again, highlight that this is a competitive grant-making program. And then you can see that we didn't have any 4s last year. Maybe they were a little harsh, or maybe that's realistic. And then we did see a handful of 4 minuses. And then the majority of our applicants in the range of 3+ to a 3-, and then a fair number in the 2+ and 2s. Okay, so going more into more detail about how to review these applications. As I mentioned before, everybody who has applied does submit a pre-application. They're then invited to a full application. And then they're sent to you all to be reviewed in a citizen review panel meeting. You all will have, except for the citizen review, except for cultural festivals, parades, and special events, no panel has more than 25 applications. And then once it gets to you all will do a preliminary rating at home. We'll have a group discussion at the panel meeting to give final ratings, and then we'll discuss any appeals. So going into a little bit more about what you'll be doing at home, you will all start to receive your applications either this week or next week. We commit to giving them to you at least at a minimum 3 weeks in advance. That way, you have enough time to read all these applications. Because we do ask that you take about 30 to 45 minutes to read each of these applications and focus in on those 3 review criteria. Do make sure that you pull up all of those work samples. We do ask that our applicants curate those So they do limit any video or audio samples to 5 minutes each. We do then ask you to record any notes. These are both, and I'll speak to this a little bit more. Take some notes for yourself. You might be reading these two weeks before the panel meeting. These notes will help you kind of give yourself a reason why you rated something one way or the other. And then I'll show you the online form where you'll actually rate based on those 3 review criteria, and that will be your preliminary rating. When it's time for the actual panel meeting, it is divided up into 2 rounds. The first round will discuss each application individually. And so we will spend about 8 to 15 minutes on each application and having a discussion. We'll kick it off with a short sampling of the work sample that they provided to refresh everybody's memory about what we're actually discussing. During that discussion process, we'll also have the opportunity to pull up any attachments. So Jess and I will pull up any component of the application that we need. We'll structure these discussions around their 3 review criteria. So we'll discuss the artistic merit for a couple minutes, discuss the community benefit for a couple minutes, and discuss organizational capacity. After we've had that discussion, we'll have a readback of all the comments being made. So we'll have a RAC staff member recording the comments. And again, we work to record the final comments. And so we might have a discussion that starts one end of the spectrum, and then we'll kind of conclude somewhere else. So before we give a final rating, a RAC staff member will read out those comments. That way, that will serve as kind of the final point of kind of the group's consensus. And so we'll read those comments back, and we'll ask each of you as a panelist to give your final rating, and this will be overall. And so after the whole group gives their rating, RAC staff will average that, and that will be kind of their rating at that point. We don't require everybody to give the same rating, but if we see one panelist give a 2+ and then another panelist give a 4-, we'll see that something's off, and we won't ask you to change your rating, but we'll make sure that everybody is seeing the same thing to make sure that we're actually hitting a consensus. At the end of the panel meeting as a whole, we'll have round 2. This is our opportunity to look at our work from top to bottom. Usually this is no more than a 30-minute discussion, but we do this so that we can make sure that we're fair and consistent throughout the day. If we forgot to talk about the first 3 applicants' board member list, well, that might have been a mistake, and so we can take a look at those at the end of the day. Also make sure that we were applying the same rigor throughout the day. If we started really hard on organizational capacity, but then after lunch we got a little easier, we can see if we need to make any adjustments. This second part of the day is governed by Robert's Rules of Order. And so if a citizen review panelist thinks that after looking at our organizations from top to bottom, that one applicant should be raised a rating or step down a rating level, there can be a motion, and if there's a second, we can have a discussion about that and then take a vote to see if we need to change any applicant's rating. Under rare circumstances, we may make a larger move, but that really has to be a clear error. Okay, and then after this process, after we've concluded round 2, that leaves all of our applicants with their final ratings. And so that's the rating that an applicant will be given along with the comments made. Okay, so again, we recognize that all of us as panelists are human beings. we might make a mistake in this process. And so because of that, we have an appeal process. And an organization can only appeal their rating if there was a clear error made. This is not an applicant's chance to disagree. This isn't their chance to give new information or explain themselves a different way. This is reserved just for errors or clear misrepresentations of fact. So all applicants have the ability to submit an appeal. RAC staff will review them to make sure that they have grounds. And if they do have grounds, we'll convene you all in an online conference meeting like we're doing today. And then we'll review each of these appeals. The applicants will be invited to listen in. They won't be able to be part of the discussion, but they will be able to listen to the discussion. And through that discussion, again, that's governed by Robert's Rules of Order. And if you all believe that, yes, you did make a mistake, and two, that mistake did have an impact on how you rated, then there's the opportunity to change that rating. Do note that we can only increase a rating through this process. We can't decrease a rating. And then afterwards, we'll share the results of that meeting with the applicants. Okay. We do also have one last component, special review. You all will receive all of your applications again in the next week or so. You might, on rare circumstances, we might need to pull an application. This doesn't happen often, and this is really just if there's something unusual that happens with an organization where RAC staff doesn't think that they'll get a fair review during the panel process, we'll pull it and have it reviewed by the grants committee. Typically, this would be if the week before the panel meeting, half the staff quit or something like that. Then we'll pull the application and have it reviewed by the grants committee. Again, last year we didn't have any of these, but just in case if an application goes missing between your review period and the day of the panel meeting, that's why. Okay, so I am going to move to a couple slides. You all don't make the final funding decisions, but I do want to show you how we use your ratings to inform those funding decisions. So this is a big scary slide that we show everybody that breaks down the grant tiers and what an applicant can receive in each of these grant tiers. So for the $15,000 grant tier, an applicant must have a $30,000 project or more, and they can receive between $7,500 and $15,000. To kind of illustrate how that happens, I'll use the $10,000 grant tier because with this one, the math is the easiest. So say you all are reviewing a $10,000 grant tier applicant and they receive a rating of 3+. So if they receive a rating of 3+, they're eligible for 80% of that grant tier. So for each step down in rating, there's a 10% step down in what they're eligible for. And so they're then eligible to receive $8,000. It is the grants committee and then ultimately the full commission that approves what rating we're able to fund to. Last year, we were only able to fund down to the 3s. And so even though last year we had organizations that received a 3- and 2+, we did not have enough funds to fund them last year. So again, the ratings you provide do inform what an applicant is eligible to receive. However, it's ultimately the grants committee and the commission that will determine which ratings we're able to fund in any given year. Okay, jumping to general operating support, I won't dive too deep into it, but just so that you are aware, we do have a funding formula that determines what an applicant is eligible to receive. So based on an organization's total functional expenses. We have a funding formula that determines how much of their budget they can receive. In this example, a $600,000 organization can receive up to 15%, 15.26% of their budget for an eligibility of up to $91,000. We're never able to fully fund that amount, but based on your rating in general operating support, there is a step down of 15%. So that is a bigger step down than program support. So in this case, an example organization that received a rating of 3 is eligible for 55% or $50,000. And then we do typically have to adjust based on how much funding we have available. So then they're eligible for $40,000. I share this with you just so that there's no questions about kind of what we do with the ratings after you give them. This is also publicly available to all of our applicants so that there's no kind of black box to our applicants on how we make our funding determination. Okay, so the next part of this training, we're going to go over kind of our guidelines for meetings and some basic tips to making sure that we have a balanced review process. Okay. Would you like to kind of start here? At all of our panel meetings, we'll kind of start with reaching a consensus about what kind of our group agreements are, about how we're going to conduct our discussions at the panel meetings. So overall, we are asking you to kind of bring an openness to others' point of view. We know that you each bring a unique skill set, a unique set of insights into the arts and culture community to our discussions, but you're not always going to agree with each other during the panel meeting. So we really hope that you kind of are open through that discussion. We do also want you to be aware of kind of the power dynamics at play. Regional Arts Commission is in the position to determine an organization's funding. And so there is a power balance there. And so we do ask that we're just aware of that because our applicants can come to these meetings. They are open to the public. Many of them do come and watch. And so we really want you to look at, kind of enter into that space that this is how an organization's funding gets determined. And so we want to make sure that we're respectful and recognize kind of the responsibility we have through this process. Again, we hope we bring a positive spirit to this regardless, but it is most important that we have that positive spirit, generosity, offering constructive critiques. Again, because we do have our applicants in the room, but we also hope that through this public review process, we're also able to offer some constructive criticism through it so our applicants can improve in the future. Ultimately, we recognize all the good that our applicants do in the community, and we want them to be better for it, and looking for ways to improve the programmings and how they engage in their community. And we hope that this citizen review panel process provides them some of that. We do ask that you bring your full attention to the discussions and limit those distractions. We will have breaks throughout this. So we will ask that you turn those cell phones off and all those other digital distractions so that we can be fully present at the panel meeting. We also hope that we can let others speak, finish thoughts, and practice active listening. We also, for those of you that might be more talkative, might want to make sure we let others have their time to speak. And lastly, we really want to make sure we stay grounded in the guidelines and the review criteria. This is not an opportunity to have our personal review criteria come into play. We might all value different things in the arts, in the programs, but to provide an equal playing field for all of our applicants, we do ask that you stay grounded in the guidelines that RAC provides and the review criteria that we provide. Okay, so we all know that we have, well, let me start over again. At the start of all of these meetings, we do ask that you declare any conflicts of interests. And the most clear-cut conflicts of interests are if you have been employed or contracted by an arts organization, or are currently contracted or employed by an arts organization being reviewed. This doesn't mean that you can't participate in the panel meeting as a whole, but you won't be able to participate in that individual applicant's review. If you do have a clear conflict of interest, we do ask that you also let Jess or I know at the start before you even start the review process. We also ask that if you have a relative that's employed, or that you maybe have a personal relationship with one of the applicants, basically if you're dating like the grant writer. If you have volunteered in the past, if you've attended, that's not a clear conflict of interest, and so you still are able to participate, but we'll just ask that you declare it. This way it's out in the open, we can discuss it and see if there's any issues or not. Again, this is just making it clear in public. We also, just so you know, we don't publish your information or provide to our applicants who's reviewing their applications in advance. So you shouldn't be getting lobbied, but just in case that you do, please limit your interactions with the applicants. Don't let them know that you're reviewing their applications and whatnot. But our applicants will also be present, as I mentioned, at these panel meetings. And so if they do try and reach out to you, we do ask them to just limit it to introducing themselves and thanking you. But we do ask that they don't speak with you during these meetings. We do ask that you be polite in kind of cutting off these conversations, because we don't want there to be any appearance of an applicant advocating or lobbying for their application. Not all of our applicants are able to attend the meetings, and so out of fairness, we do ask that we limit those conversations. At the end of the process, we will be listing you and publicly thanking you on our website. This way our applicants know the diversity of folks who are reviewing their applications, but we will gladly keep your name off if you'd like to opt out of that. Okay, so as you're going about rating, we do like you to kind of keep 3 key values in mind: objectivity, consistency, and confidentiality. In being objective, we do ask that you review only the application materials provided by the applicant. We don't do site visits. Some of you may have attended or be aware of the programming of the applicants, but we do ask that you ground it in just what they've provided. Bring your expertise as a generalist, as somebody knowledgeable in the arts and culture, but limit the specifics to what an applicant provides in the application, because not all of them will have the benefit of having a panelist personally attending or having additional knowledge about it. So again, basically saying another way, leave that outside knowledge of the applicants at the door. And as I mentioned before, please only use the provided review criteria as the basis for your ratings. You may love arts education, but that doesn't mean you can rate a arts education organization higher than a performing organization or a presenting organization. And then with consistency, we want to make sure that we're consistent throughout for all of our applicants. So be consistent in your rating. Use the same rigor with each application. Consistently consider all the materials being provided when rated. If you were reading at home and you are going through 6 organizations' budgets with a fine-tooth comb, make sure you go through the other 8 organizations' budgets with a fine-tooth comb. So be consistent in considering all of their application materials. And I may be sounding like a squeaky wheel, but consistently apply the review criteria to each application. So make sure that you are applying all three to all of your applicants. And then we also ask you to keep some things confidential. During the review process, we ask that you don't discuss these applications with other readers. RAC staff works to be a moderator amongst all of our panel meetings. But if you are discussing an application with another panelist, Jess and I aren't there to make sure that you're having an appropriate discussion about those. And also make sure that our applicants doesn't think that there is kind of a conspiracy behind things to have a discussion about the application outside of the public meeting. You'll also be receiving an applicant's financial information. Some of it's not necessarily public. And you might also be hearing about programs well in advance then an applicant is ready to list them publicly. So we do ask that you keep that information confidential. Don't share that. We also ask that you don't share an applicant's ratings publicly. RAC doesn't share an applicant's ratings, and so keep that information confidential. Okay. And I've made mention about the application comments. We have kind of two sets of comments. The ones that you can make in the online review form, those will help you as you're going about preparing for the panel meeting discussion. Those comments that you make online also give Jess and I a heads up on kind of what we need to be attentive to when it comes time to bring up this discussion. So we'll use those for context. We'll also have our final comments. These are the comments that will be made during the citizen review panel meeting. Just some general tips there. We do ask that you be succinct. We only have 8 to 15 minutes per application. Be direct. Try not to pad. Don't use a whole lot of superlatives or things like that. Kind of get to the point. And use strong active voice. We do want to make sure that it's technical, it's objective and factual, and so not comments that leave things open to interpretation. So some good, strong comments. Have a few examples here. Is that the applicant has a clear artistic selection process, so that speaks to it, and that's evidenced by X, Y, and Z in the narrative and the selection criteria. When we're talking about their fundraising plan or their goals, we can list examples. So when we're providing these comments, we want to be grounding them in the review criteria and specifically calling out kind of evidence in the application. When we're having our discussions, we always want to keep in mind that we're all bringing our either recognized biases or not recognized biases to these conversations. So we want to be mindful about combating these biases and being aware of them and making sure that we're not bringing them into the review process. And so I provided here just some common examples of different forms of biases. The tool that's linked here, though not a perfect tool, is just a tool to kind of frame some of these. So I'll speak to a few of those. So confirmation bias. We might have a preconceived notion about, say, dance programs. And so then we might be then reviewing a dance program's application and kind of cherry picking information or listening in that conversation only for the information that confirms our existing bias. or our preconceived notion about a program. We want to make sure that we recognize that we might have a tendency to do that. And so again, be opening to those other points of view and looking at the information that might speak against our bias there. And then we know that we're bringing 5 of you all together. And so anytime you get a group together, there's something that's called the bandwagon effect. We want to avoid the bandwagon. So just because somebody starts off our conversation with a particular comment, doesn't mean you have to go along with that. So if you're a citizen review panelist and you hear three people speak to how great the community benefit is, but you have a serious issue about the community benefit because you don't think it's articulated well, it means you don't have to go along with it. Bring up that alternative point of view. That's the whole point of us having these discussions. Then kind of the one that we're probably most familiar about is stereotyping. These are just our generalized beliefs. This can be a stereotype about a particular art form, stereotype about a particular community that's being served. So we want to make sure that we're not bringing those to the table and actively working to combat stereotyping. And then survivorship. This is kind of a tricky one to articulate sometimes. Basically, an example of this is that you've experienced either a success or a challenge in pulling off a community festival. And based on that, one example on that was successful, all the others must follow suit. And so really, don't focus on the one successful or non-successful example you have. Come at it with an open mind and looking at kind of what they've articulated on their success or not. Okay, and then the other one is kind of zero risk or kind of risk avoidance. So Regional Arts Commission does want our applicants to be able to bring in new innovative programs. And so we want to make sure that we are not being overly risk adverse and allowing these applicants to be successful or to tell us how they're going to combat those risks. And again, provided a link to this tool that goes into a little bit more detail. Okay, and then the next thing that we can't ignore here is the equity lens. Just being in the interest of full transparency, the Regional Arts Commission does not currently have an equity statement. There are discussions being made about the Regional Arts Commission developing an equity statement. But just because RAC doesn't have one right now, doesn't mean we can't bring an equity lens to our grant review process. So I've made mention before is that we want to make sure we're being mindful of the size, scale, and varying capacity of our different organizations. We mentioned earlier about we can have varying expectations about budget size, but some of the other things that we can make sure we're mindful is that we're avoiding any sort of racial bias. So make sure that we're not bringing that stereotyping or discrimination into this process. We're looking to make sure that we're pursuing equity. So are our applicants recognizing and accounting for all the complexity that goes into dealing with equity issues? So are they looking at and recognizing the different socioeconomic forces at play? Are we recognizing in the discussions the different challenges also that an applicant might have that might, if an applicant is a non-European art form, we must recognize that there's added challenges to fundraising for those types of programs. When we're looking at diversity, we want to make sure our applicants are reflecting the diversity of the St. Louis community. And we know that that traditionally is understood as ethnic and racial, but this can also be other forms of diversity, gender diversity. Are they working specifically with people of different physical ability? And so when we're talking about diversity, we have diversity statistics in our applications, but we also have the opportunity in our narrative, in the narratives in the applications, to them to speak to other forms of diversity. And then we also want to make sure that these programs that we are funding are inclusive and accessible. So again, we want to make sure we're bringing all of these components into the review process. Okay, so we're going to jump into the application outline itself. And so all of our applications, GOS and program support, are structured similarly. There's a couple overview sections, and then sections that focus in on the 3 review criteria areas. We do also have financials, and since again, most of you are program support people, we have the program budget, the budget narrative, the organization's budget as a whole, and then their 2-year financials. Okay, so this is our grant reviewer system. When you receive your applications, you'll be getting an email from Jess with your login information. You'll see a screen like this. And then you'll see all of your applications outlined as such. This, just for example purposes, a list of artist support grants, but where you see all those blue names, those will be all the organizations. You'll have a review form. It is side by side. So on the left side, you'll see the actual application. There's a drop-down menu that you can use to navigate to the different sections of the application. And we do ask at home that you provide each of the 3 review criteria a rating. This will populate your overall rating, and this is a starting point for the discussion at the panel meeting. Again, this is just your preliminary rating. You are welcome and encouraged to change your mind and change and adapt a rating based on the discussion. But again, we wanted you all to have a starting point. You have an opportunity again to mark any conflicts of interest, so please do so as you're going through these applications. And also feel free to provide comments. We will provide you with any of your notes from here at the panel meeting, but do note that these aren't public, but can be used to help guide the conversation at the panel meeting. I am going to jump into reviewing the financials because I recognize that this isn't everybody's strong suit. But also, just so you know, Jess and I do review these finances in depth, specifically to bring up any red flags if you as panelists don't bring them up. I'm going to skip over the GOS work because most of you are program support folks. Oh, and I skipped too far. Okay, when we're looking at an applicant's budget, you will see 2 sections. The first 2 columns when you're looking at it will be last year's budget, last year's actual. So this should give you a picture of what they did in the past compared to what they're budgeting this year. So you'll be able to compare last year's with what they're budgeting for this upcoming grant cycle. It is broken down into all these different categories. If you have any questions about them, we do have descriptions of what everybody should be seeing in these categories. When we get to the grand total, I have $51,000 circled here. This is the program's overall budget. To be eligible in the different grant categories, they have to have at least twice as much as that grant year. So in this case, this applicant is clearly eligible for the $15,000 grant because they have more than $30,000 in expenses. When we get into income, again, it is broken up by last year, so they're actuals. And then this budget. And so they're supposed to provide their budgeted and then their confirmed funds. It is broken up into 3 different sections: grants and foundations. We do list the most common arts funders, so RAC, A&E, MAC, NEA. But an applicant isn't required or expected to have all of these. For example, an organization might have 2 programs. They might be applying to RAC for one and MAC for the other. So just because an applicant doesn't have a grant from A&E or a grant from MAC, this doesn't necessarily count against them. Our next section is broken up into fundraising and donors. And so this is where we can see what individual contributions, board contributions, corporates, or special events they might be using to support this program. And then they also have earned revenue. And so does this organization receive like ticket sales or subscriptions, etc.? And we are looking, based on the type of program, that there's a healthy balance here. This then populates down to total income. And just so you know, the organization's budgets do not, by design, have to balance. An applicant is expected to have the required match, even if they don't receive the full funding. So we do ask our applicants to budget a little bit more in income in case they don't receive the full grant award from RAC. We also know that an applicant may earn more revenue than it might cost to put on the program, and that is perfectly fine and appropriate, and it's a great sign that they're avoiding the nonprofit starvation cycle. Okay, again, this is for general operating support, and we're going to skip over this for this training. Okay, so next steps for you all. All of our applications have been turned in, and so those all are in. Jess and I are reviewing them to make sure that there's no issues, so that we can get them sent to you, and we don't have any problems with them. We will be sending out all of these applications to you by kind of next week at the latest. We do ask that you log in and check them out. Let us know if there's any direct conflicts of interest. If you give us enough heads up, we might be able to switch some things. But most importantly, we want to make sure that you're able to log in and get access to the applications, so that we don't have any snafus later on as it gets closer to the actual panel meeting. Then you all should have your assigned panel meeting dates. Again, those are the last 2 weeks in March, first week of April. And then just keep on your calendar that we will also be having the appeals calls. Again, we won't bring you all into the same room, but do know that we will be asking you to commit to maybe a 15 to 30 minute conference call to consider those. So at this time, I'm going to unmute you all in case you have any questions. Okay, so do we have any questions from anybody right now? Okay, so not hearing any questions. If they come up as you're reading your applications or going through any of the material, please don't hesitate to give Jess or I a call. We'd be happy to address them. So don't be shy about reaching out. And again, just would like to thank you all. So we appreciate you committing the time this morning to this orientation and training. We appreciate the time you're committing to read all these applications, and especially your time serving as a panelist during our panel meeting and committing to that full day. So again, thank you, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.